So welcome guys to this second instalment of our interview with Mark Schofield. The spectators have now moved to the hot tub. For those of you with a really acute ear, you might have picked up the dripping noise of it filling during the first half. The garden studio is still in full swing, and Scof is now going to go on to talking about topics that kind of come in after his competitive career. His time in and around the surf industry, founding a wetsuit company and then getting involved with one of the biggest companies of the 2000s, the travel that brought about, and then, of course, further complications with his kidney transplants. This amazing life story, of course, wouldn't be what it is without those challenges, and it's really interesting to hear about how Scof dealt with that as it came around for the second time in his life. And then eventually we're going to get right up to date with his opinions on modern surfing, which are multifarious and fascinating to hear. So thanks for the first half, Scof, and we're all looking forward to the second.
So welcome back to part 2 of the Mark Schofield interview, and we left off last time talking about how great it was to be a surfer in the days gone by, and but it wasn't always sunshine and roses, Mark, and some things were slightly more difficult, such as a trip to the north of Scotland.
Yeah, we did a trip when we went for the European surf competition. Myself and Brad decided to go up earlier with a guy called Crest, and the car he had was a Robin Reliant Kitten. Now, what a Robin Reliant Kitten is exactly the same as a Robin Reliant, except with 4 wheels. That's the only difference. Yeah. So it was as light as a feather. It was really small, and it had I think it was a 950, but it could have been a 650 engine in it.
Like a 2-stroke.
Literally like a little ditty engine in the front. Anyway, he reckoned that this thing could get to Scotland. So we strapped our 6 surfboards on the top of this van, and off we went. We couldn't do it all in one go. I think we stopped in Inverness, actually. But I can remember bombing our way up there in this Reliant, and it would go really fast down the hills, and then we'd go really slow up the hills, really slow. And if anybody's been to Scotland, which you've all been, they are long, drawn-out roads once you get past.
Yeah. Oh, it's a long way from Inverness.
Once you get past Manchester, Scotland seems like, great, I'm in Scotland, but you've got the same distance to go. And this is all pretty new to us anyway, to go up to Scotland. So this little Robin Reliant would bomb up there, and it was so funny. I can remember him like telling us to drive and stuff, because he was taking, we were just sitting there for ages, and we'd sit on the wheel. I can remember being like white-knuckled, because we couldn't, I didn't have a driving licence or anything, and we were there driving away, holding on these roads that were going, and they'd go really fast. And if there's a car in front, you'd hope the car would go up the hill before you actually met the car, so you didn't have to overtake it.
Lose your revs.
So you'd be going down the hill like the clappers, and he'd be going, don't lose your speed, and you're going, there's a car in front, there's a car in front.
The Chris Chip School of Motoring.
God, yeah, no, it was amazing. And the other thing he used to make us do, he used to, these were just classic times.
Chris used to take people on trips, didn't he?
Chris was great. I mean,
and he's Chip.
Some people live in, because he lived in Chippenham, and there were loads of Chips.
It's Chris O'Connor who we mentioned in the last
and it's a classic Welsh thing in it. Yeah. You name the people where they come from. So that's how he got the name. But I got on really well with Chris, and I still do, and so did Brad. And anyway, what we used to do, we used to either go around his house, or he'd take us on trips, and he used to make us mow his lawn and stuff before he'd take us to like Aberafon. We had great things, but his wife would want him to mow the lawn, so he'd have like 4 of us there mowing the lawn, sweeping up all of it really quickly, and off we'd go then to Aberafon. We'd clean windows and everything for him. But what Chris had done back then, leashes were basically bungee cords. They were bungee cords. So when you fell off, the board could be about 3 miles away from you, and what you hoped is it didn't come out of the water. If it tombstone, didn't it? If it was fully like stuck up, and as it came down, like, it would come back at you faster than you could believe. It would fire back at you. And Chris used to make these leashes, and these leashes were made from the rubber that goes across the road that used to do speed.
Yeah, they have like
things.
one after the other, don't they?
Yeah, it's like a pressure thing.
They
isn't
still
it?
have
Pushes
them now
the
and
pressure.
again. You see them here
I
and
think
there,
they
don't
do
you?
counting now, don't they?
Okay.
Every time we went over one of them, we had to get out and rip it up from the road, wind it up, and put it in the car in his van. In his van, because what he would do, he'd make a leash out of it, and he'd got a way that he used like a Jubilee clip to clamp the end, and then you'd stick it in a vice, and you'd stretch it like as long as you could stretch it, and so the cord would go inside the actual leash, and then you'd put another clip on the end. It was quite, if that came out of the vice, you knew about it, and then you'd put another clip on the end, and it would all go back in, and there you go, you got a leash then. And when we were down in Cornwall, we'd have to go and sell them then around the car parks for our keep, like. But in fairness to him, when I went with Chris, I can remember petrol being 36. I don't know whether it'll match it, but I always remember 36 pence a gallon, and he used to charge us like a £5 each, which seemed a lot. And we'd go around Cornwall, we'd go everywhere around Cornwall. There wasn't a break that he didn't take us to. We had the map with the winds and everything, and we'd get up in the morning and he'd say, right, we're going here, we're going there. And he used to take us everywhere around Cornwall, everywhere. Anywhere, Constantine was a nice place we used to surf, but everywhere he took us. And we used to stop, and then if the car park was full, it was, but hop out, boys, go and flog some leashes, go on, and off we'd trundle. Don't buy a leash, mate. And at the time, I don't think we weren't, all we were was just normal surfers, you know. We were just having a ball. It was like an adventure, if you know what I mean, rather than, now it's all, you know, we used to use the leashes to hang on the back of bikes. And so if you've got a leash, and it would guy riding in the front, you'd be like skiing on a skateboard, you'd be banging. You can see it on the prom, can't you?
Yeah.
The guy's riding home and you're on the back, somebody walk skiing on your on the bungee, and you could pull yourself in, you could go right away, and you could have a bit of power then to like shoot yourself along, because our parents didn't pick us up. It's not because they were nasty, they just didn't do that sort of stuff. It wasn't sort of the age of, you know, we got to be perfect parents. It was just, you know, I've got kids, let them live, innit? Let them go on.
Free range kids.
Yeah, but it was more of an adventure, and we felt, because we surfed, I'm sure all of them would say that, we felt a little bit different. I would imagine even your dad and stroke your mum felt different when they were back in the day.
Yeah.
It wasn't sort of like feels like everybody surfs now, or gives it a go, don't they? Yeah. You know, everybody is. Well, back when we were, they didn't. It was, God, if the sea was pumping and there was 5 of us in the sea, now I'm talking the whole of Rest Bay now, there's 5 guys in, we would sit in a little bunch and our boards would tangle up, because we'd let the leashes go, we'd let the boards go, because we hadn't learned how to duck dive, and all the boards would be tangled up, and we'd have to untangle them now, and yet we got the whole of Rest Bay. It just seems mad. It's almost like, why were you doing that? But we're literally like bouncing around right by us.
Well, that's it. Dad talks about turning up at Rest Bay or any break, and you kind of, sometimes you'd wait for someone to turn up to go surfing with them, rather than now you aim to avoid them at all costs.
You know, I can remember surfing the point, and you'd be ringing people up to get it. I remember surfing the point before they surfed the point without wind. You know, it had to be a really windy day to surf the point. It wouldn't surf, you know, we'd surf Rest Bay.
The idea of going there when it was clean,
didn't even heard of. It was only because one day I can remember going from my house with Mike Shilling, and it probably didn't happen exactly like this, but it feels that it did. We went from my house with Mike Shilling. I had taken time off school, so my mother lived down by the point. So instead of going to Rest Bay, we went in the point, and the swell was really good, and the point was pumping, and we couldn't believe we were sitting in the point with no wind. Do you know what I mean? In these sets, and it was like classic point, and we were in there, and there was, I tell you who was in there then, was it Beasley? Beezer. But he was a really good surfer, and I can remember watching him.
He might actually no longer be with us, if that's... the guy.
He actually moved down to northern Spain. Is that
Yeah.
him?
There were a few, weren't there? There was a really good skateboarder as well.
He moved down to northern Spain.
Sure
So you were there with Beezer?
No, it was like the four of us were in the sea, and I couldn't believe how good it was. And then after that, it felt as if we would always be hunting, like we always are, if there's a chance.
Those days.
But in fairness, it was never as busy. If you had 10 guys out there, it'd be busy for us. You know, we'd just be phoning each other up.
No.
And the S was a really good break as well. God, before they built that stupid, well, it's not stupid, but before the
beach.
break, you could actually try and catch the wave, and it would hit the wall, and it would have a backwash.
Yeah.
So you could try and come back on the backwash.
Wow.
And also we used to surf it more. It could go lower when you surfed it, and we used to surf it a little bit smaller, and it was a lot faster. It was just like a different wave. You know, it didn't do that bit. They were really good times over in the Espo. They were good.
Now, in last week's episode, the first part of the Mark Schofield interview, we left off just after you'd had your first kidney transplant, Mark, and you were getting quite heavily into golf, and you were still surfing, but perhaps not as much as you were, or with not as much dedication perhaps as you were before that. But it was also during this period that you embarked upon your career in the surf industry, and I've kind of got surf industry in inverted commas at this point. But it had started some years earlier, I believe, selling wetsuits out of your bedroom.
Yeah. It had started. Originally, it started when your dad, Bob Blythe, came to me and he said, "How do you fancy selling?"
Oh, you were 15, 16
Yeah,
at the time?
I was a little older than that. I think I was a little bit older than that. But he said, "Look, I know Tom Sherlock,
Andy Sherlock.
Andy Sherlock.
Tom Selleck's my
No,
name.
Is that Second Skin?
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Second
So
Skin.
Dad had the
Second
agency
Skin.
for that, I think, and I think he was sponsoring you at the time.
Yeah, he actually
And
gave.
you'd obviously proven
he
yourself
actually
with
gave
your
me a
ability to
wetsuit.
fashion leashes from rubber in the first
Well,
place. So
no, that was just Chris telling us to do crazy stuff. No, what he'd done, he'd said that I could sell the wetsuits, and if I sold a wetsuit, I'd get a tenner, so or a fiver or whatever it was. So in my room, I had loads of Second Skin wetsuits, and at that time they had, I think Norma's was around, but nobody was really doing wetsuits in that way. So I was flogging these wetsuits out of my bedroom, basically. They were good. They were classic wetsuits. The zip went all the way down to your.
I grew up
thigh.
with Second Skin wetsuits, and I mean, Andy's still going. He still makes fantastic suits.
Yeah,
but
they're really
I
good
remember
suits.
having kind of inherited those suits that my sister had worn before me, and just
Yeah,
spending the
yeah.
whole day in the sea and not even feeling. I think you felt the water, let alone the cold.
Well, and also they were like the zip was down to your bloody nuts, so you bloody everything got cold because you were sitting in the water. The only good thing was the boards were slightly more buoyant, so you were a little bit more. Whereas now they're like up to their chest, and they're like sitting there like, oh, you see, look, I can see his chest.
So that was kind of your first foray into the surf
it
industry.
was,
But
yeah.
you tried your hand at a few things. You tried your hand at shaping, but you said it was a
I
bit,
did. My
bit too
parents-
smelly.
My parents had a caravan in the back garden. I say, like a big caravan in the back garden, and what I did was I turned it into a shaping room. I decided I wanted to make surfboards, so I had a shaping bay in the end of it. In one of the rooms, I'd knocked two in. You know, if you imagine one of those caravans, each room was a job to make, and I think I only made 2 or 3 boards. Okay, now Brad actually did ride one of my boards. It was a spotted one, I think Brad had, which was really good of him to just buy it, really, you know, because you know he's a really good surfer, and he was getting on somebody's board that, you know, looking back on it, they're okay. Well, I'm going to tell you, because the original one is actually I'm in the process, hopefully, of buying it. I got a photo of it.
this is a running theme in Crest. We've been talking about people keeping and
Yes.
finding their boards and having old boards.
I
and
must
not giving
admit,
them away.
I'm not a massive one for that. I wouldn't go out. Just this one. The reason why I sort of like this, because and I'll say why. It came about because I had to go into clinic one day, and the lady on reception always talks to me like she tells him about her son surfing and stuff and all his adventures, and she tells him. And the other day she goes, "My son's got your original surfboard you bought." And I went, yeah, you know, like thinking she's just being nice. And I'm thinking, didn't even think about it. And she goes, "I tell you what, I'll bring you a photo of it." Do you know, when I went in the next time, she showed me this photo of this surfboard that was either the first or the second board I'd ever done or I tried to shape. I honestly couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe it. She floored me. And that's why now I'm like thinking, yeah, I think I'd like that one. And George can surf it. He can't surf any worse, can he? So he might surf better on it. A twin fin. Do you see the shape of it?
Yeah,
a teardrop.
Yeah.
A teardrop twin fin with a squash tail.
So it's quite self-deprecating, I'd say, about your surfboard shaping. But you then went on to find a niche working with textiles and of course founding the famous No Limit wetsuits.
No Limit wetsuits, yeah.
Now of Greg Owen.
Now Greg Owen. Now that came about because it sounds bad now. I did wet. Surfboards are really smelly to do. Mm-hmm. They're even worse than they were now. I think because now they've got resin, haven't they? They've got resin that is almost
They're
odorless.
working on it, yeah.
Odorless, you know.
That's part of the fun, though. Fresh board smell.
Yeah,
not if you're making
but it's all in your clothes. Yeah. I remember I used to work in a chip shop in when Studio One, it used to be the cinema in Treco, used to be open, and I worked in a chip shop up there, and I just like glassed this board, and I went up there to work, and I went in there, and she goes, "What the hell's this smell?" I said, "What smell?" She goes, "Someone is buzzing in here." And I'm like thinking, you can't smell over chips, can you? Fish and chips, they buzz, all this stuff. And she goes, "Someone is stinking in here." And the woman was a really nice woman. She had black hair, I remember really vividly. And I'm sitting there, and my job was to peel the potatoes. But they had a potato machine, I'd shove the potatoes in there. And she goes, "Someone is stinking in this place, and what is it?" And it turns out it was me, and I was sent home then to go and get changed because I was buzzing from making the surfboards. But yeah, what I did then, sorry, got offline, I only just remembered that. I went then and I decided I wanted to make wetsuits, and I really thought this was a good idea because there weren't many people making wetsuits, there weren't a lot of people. And I felt that, I could make a wetsuit. And I actually knew a guy who was a tailor. And I went to him to show me how to make the patterns and do that. And I started making wetsuits. The WDA actually had...
The Welsh
Development Agency, as it was then. They had a unit in Treforest Industrial Estate that allowed textile people to try and set their business up so they could get started. And I went in there and I got on really well with the people that were in there, and they had a machine in there that would do it. In fact, they bought the machine in for me to actually do it because they were all for that sort of stuff. And I started making wetsuits, and I enjoyed that. I surfed as well as making wetsuits. There's some pictures of those. There's quite a few people that actually had those wetsuits. They're actually okay. And I stopped because at that point, what we did was myself and Ben then went into Ruddle.
Great surfer.
He is a good surfer, yeah. And he was a really good guy, he was a good friend, Ben was. And Ben and me set up a business making No Limit wetsuits. And the funny thing about it, back then, neoprene has done the same thing. Now again, it's sort of come into fashion. But back then, we would be making our wetsuits, and then we started making all the wetsuits, but just stitching them together, gluing them and stitching them together. That's basically what we did.
So they'd send them to you as like a...
So they'd send them all cut up, and we would actually stitch them together, sewing and stuff, and that's really what we started doing. And then we got a phone call then from a guy who wanted us to make the knee protectors and arm protectors, and it was just a random phone call, to be honest. And he said, do you use neoprene? Yeah, and we started making them then. We started making some of them. And that's really how the factory grew. And then we stopped making wetsuits when we were offered a factory in Port Talbot making ladies' clothing. And what we did, we took the no limit bit, and there was a room that we could put it in. So we put all the materials and the machines and stuff we had in the room, and we offered Greg an opportunity. Greg was like really keen, because what he did, I think he either did the repairs or he came every so often to do stuff, and he then started doing it. I can remember once finding him asleep in between the sheets of neoprene. He'd come down, because we always wanted him to be there at a certain time if he could. And he come down, he got in between the neoprenes, and he's like fast asleep like a little baby in there he was. But he was only young then, he was a young boy. But he then set off. We did have a few occasions that there's a few occasions, because our main thing was, what we didn't want him to do was, we didn't want any grief from it. Do you know, like
a hands-off thing.
Yeah, it was like, I don't want grief. I don't want people ringing me up telling me you haven't turned up. And there was occasion that he did it, but after that, Greg did it, and look at him now. He makes a great wetsuit. And he's still got the same machines that I had in the beginning: a Treasure blind stitch machine and a triple stitch Singer machine. Yeah. And he's still got them. I could still repair those machines.
And he makes a fabulous wetsuit.
He does a good job, Greg.
So
yeah, he's a good guy.
You then grew in terms of your involvement in the surf industry, or I suppose the industry you were in grew. We've got the internet, we've got the growth of the surf media, we've got sponsorship, big sponsorship making surfers and products grow. We've got, Oki. Billabong hitched their star to Oki, Quicksilver hitched their star to Slater, the two companies become sort of stratospheric. Rip Curler hitched to Curran, and this then is where Brad Hockridge, your buddy from school, he's also in and around Billabong at exactly the right time, gets himself well placed, and then you guys end up essentially industry kingpins, I suppose. Really,
I wouldn't say. I said what Brad did really well with Billabong, and when he had finished Billabong, I think he was doing Globe, so he didn't need anything else. Yeah. But someone had offered him the Realm to do. Yeah. And it so happened that we were playing football together, and he said one day about getting stuff made, and I actually knew people that could get stuff made in the Far East.
This is the clothing factory in Leong, spelt with an R, isn't it, in Thailand?
Yeah, in fairness, there was a lot of factories being used, but because
you guys went over there a few times.
We went quite a lot, but basically he showed me a rack of clothes that he had been given by one of his guys that Brad knew, and he said, "Do you reckon you could get those made?" And I said yes, and then from there we sort of met with people, and it was a hard job then, and I tell you why, because we didn't have all of the instant photos and all of that. We basically had to pack the garment up, and we would send it by small post to get it to Thailand. They would look at the model, I'd ring up on the phone and try and talk it to them. Now you've got video stuff and all that. It's amazing how far it's come from when we did, and then we would fly over there, visit the people in the factories, and off we'd go. But we had
fly the other way to California and meet.
Yeah, we would sometimes. It would usually for the meetings and stuff. We would then go to, California and stuff. But the Thailand trips and that used to be really nice trips. Yeah. I mean, I unfortunately lost some of those, 'cause when my kidney failed again, I couldn't travel like that again. But at that moment, it was a really good. It was again. It felt as if we were learning again. It was an adventure, It was a full-on adventure.
We're going to come to talking about the fact that there's more. There's another big low to come, to come in your story. But right now, dealing with this high. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about those days? You guys were meeting Tom Curran. I remember you brought. One day, one of you was like, can you guys go and pick someone up from the airport for us, please? It's a guy called Matt Archbold, and you were surrounded by.
And also, working with your friends in what you've already mentioned is an industry that was kind of running at full ebb at that point, wasn't it? It was good times in the surfing industry.
No, when we started it off, when it was at the beginning, and there was, first of all, it was, I'm going to say me and Brad, but I had met somebody in. Another thing I was doing was hockey shirts. I was getting hockey shirts made, and the person who was designing them, Andrew McLean, he was my mate. And I said to him, Brad sort of got this real sorted now. This would be a really
this is
good
great.
thing.
I didn't know some of this stuff. You know, knowing Andrew McLean well, but I didn't know you guys went back before that. You know,
No, this is a really good idea now, Andrew. I think Brad's got this. I can remember in a cafe in Cardiff, and I said, I think Brad's going to do this good now. He just seems to be on it with it. And he was actually working for Shine Dog, the company was called, which I had done. We'd made hockey shirts for all the hockey league basically, and that's what we were doing. I was getting all the hockey shirts made, with Andrew was designing them and I was getting them made. And so from that we sort of pinched him from Shannon, but it wasn't quite like that. And then Andrew came over, first of all just part-time. We'd go over his house and we'd go through the whole range bit by bit. We'd go to the range and say, right, we like that, we don't like that, send it over, get it all made. And it was basically come in, box would come in, and you'd think, great, it's, it looks pretty good. And then if things were wrong, we'd have to then rejig them and rewrite them. But Andrew was then designing it. But those times working with Andrew, with Brad, and as it got bigger, it was Rhino, who was an amazing guy to work with. He came on board as well. There was Jen. There was like so many people there. This is in the beginning, the very start of it all. It's funny, again, I'm coming back to it. It's almost, we always want something bigger, don't we? We always want it to be bigger, but sometimes bigger doesn't make it better. When I look back when we were striving to get there, it felt better. I think the classic one is Del Boy, the end of Del Boy, isn't it? When it's almost, you forget that it's the fight, it's the journey that is more important than reaching it. And sometimes when you reach the top, people have fallen off, and people that you sort of, were good. It was good times in the beginning. I mean, there's not a company that isn't. Look at Facebook, look at any of them. There's casualties in all of that, isn't there? And in the beginning it was great.
So during that period, as we mentioned earlier, surfing had kind of taken a bit of a backseat for you. Did working in this kind of environment with your friends, did it kind of reignite?
No, that pulled me back in. Yeah, I must have, I surfed loads then, and that was one of the beautiful things about it. I can honestly say, for a period of time, for quite a long period of time, to be honest, for a good few years, I was relatively healthy. I mean, I wasn't great, but I was relatively healthy in the beginning. And, I didn't even care what day it was, because if I got up on a Monday and there was surf, I'd go surfing. Yeah. And then we'd have a surf, and then we'd go back to work.
You'd be sitting there in the point, and it would be good, and then I'd suddenly see those 3 double overhead vans all come down. Here they come.
No, we could turn up, and it was perfect. It was a dream, We worked... I think we worked pretty hard when we had to, and then, but we could work when we wanted to. There wasn't like being at 9 o'clock.
You were, lords, kingpins, dons, whatever you were for a while. I remember.
Well, I didn't actually feel that, to be quite honest with you. I mean,
I remember going to see you guys in the bigger trade show in Anglet at the Glees Expo.
Yeah.
And you two were sort of sat at the deep end of the trade show,
holding court
in this, with like a queue of little French groms turning up every now and then, begging you for a free T-shirt.
I don't think it was.
You were saying, "Oh, you're off to Mundaka tomorrow." Now, Tom Curran showed me how to surf Mundaka properly last week. It's like.
It was good. It wasn't quite like that. I don't feel as if I was the Don, because there's people that have, there's people that are, there are people, that have done loads more, Quicksilver people. I mean, I've been very fortunate to sit with the founders of NHS, which is basically the founders of...
Not Nybevan.
Not Nybevan, Novak, yeah. And I don't know the
company
others.
that Independent Trucks
Independent Trucks Santa Cruz have come out of. Yeah. And when you listen to their stories, and you listen to some of them they've done, you sit there in awe, and you can't believe that, they're talking about all the groups, the mamas and papas, and he came round when we were doing this, and when we did these trucks in the beginning.
Yeah, but you guys had the Welsh rugby team round, I remember.
Yeah, no, we did.
Turning up one time and James Hock was on his way out the door.
Gannets, the Welsh rugby team.
We did. Well, what happened with the Welsh rugby team was, I'm not a massive rugby guy, so the tickets and stuff didn't really, they'd give tickets, but they started coming around, and this was a good time as well, and they'd come round, and some of them were brilliant. Some of them would wear the clothes and they'd do everything. They were brilliant. Others, you could see they had no intention of wearing the clothes. They were taking the clothes to give to people. Yeah. It was like, hey mate, would you like a round t-shirt? But they weren't going to wear it. But a fair few of them did, in fairness. But it got to the point whereby they were literally clearing out the warehouse. The funny thing is, though, I tell you what I did find is their sizes changed. We had to make a range bigger, sample.
As rugby became a more muscly sport.
Yeah.
Or is it because they were?
As rugby became
when they went off to the camp.
As rugby became a more muscly sport, as they trained harder. As they trained harder. But
Gareth Thomas, he was always in a round t-shirt, wasn't he?
Gareth Thomas was the man when it came to us. He was the man, and he treated us well.
So let's have less of this. Hey, you don't want my stories, guys. You want Novak stories.
Yeah,
this is,
well.
Your stories are what we want.
Mama Cass, he
treated it.
I raised you a Gareth Thomas.
Yeah, no, he appreciated what was done for him by a long way.
And now from the highs, it's during your time working in double overhead that you suddenly realise the second kidney is also failing, and then this was a massive health and well-being.
Yeah, the second one, the second one was it started to fail, and it was pretty hard because I had a good life, really. I had a good life, I had a good family, a good job, and this thing is failing away, and I find that I was, again, I'm going to say, Brad treated me incredibly well, and I decided that I was going to try and get a kidney from abroad, and the Philippines was the place I was going to go. All, I'm going to say legitimate. It was legitimate at that time, and that's what I decided to do. But I was on dialysis. The reason I tried, because I waited a while here. I was on dialysis, and I home dialysed. So basically,
we used to come round and we
you
taught you
did
to play
very
poker,
good.
didn't we?
You taught us to play poker. You were really good coming round, because although I didn't sit on it for ages because I dialysed all of the time, I'm still sitting on there. But I had to stick my own needles in my arm. You have a fist and you stick your needles in, and the blood then pumps around the machine. I'm doing it very, very, pumps around the machine and acts like your kidney. And I would always need a bit of help doing it. This is a funny story now. And I'd need help doing it. Usually I could do it pretty good on my own, but I would need a little bit of help holding some of the stuff. And this time George was helping me. Do you remember this, George? George is helping me doing the needles. Yeah. And I stuck the needles in, and I hadn't connected it up properly, so I turned the machine on, and the blood was squirting everywhere, and I couldn't work out where this blood is coming from. And I'm thinking, and George is like standing there, and he goes, "Dad, I'm not sure I like this." And he's just standing there because he can't do anything. But he goes, "Oh God, I'm not sure whether I like this." And the machine's going around the blood, and I'm trying to find out. God, Christ, I can't find out why you put the wrong over.
That fistula thing that they put in your wrist was a pretty horrid contraption as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because you came in and met some of my students, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
And I remember you inviting one of them to touch it, and this guy jumped
thrill.
like 3 foot in the air
Thrill,
because it was like an electronic buzzing kind
like
of
a buzz
lump in your wrist.
They put a fistula in. What they do is they cut the artery and they connect it to a vein, and because arterial pressure is greater than venous pressure, the vein gets bigger. It grows.
Right.
And it obviously grows. It can grow quite big. I mean, mine was quite an animal. It was quite a big thing up my arm. Basically, so you can get the needles in a bit better. So that was that. And it felt, because the flow would go down your arm and then fizz back up, it felt like it's called a thrill. It just, you can feel it going. But when someone touches it, they think there's a little pump in there or something. Okay. So. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that, but that was a massive part of me, that was.
So you briefly touched upon there, Scof, that you travelled to the Philippines in search of a replacement kidney, and the BBC came along for the ride, didn't they, with a documentary team?
They did.
When it was aired on, it was certainly BBC Wales. I remember watching it at the time, and it was
week in, week out. I think it was.
Yeah, it was. It was a weekend, week out, and when it was, and
it was really quite moving, wasn't it? And it was
it furthered the debate, and I suppose presumed consent didn't exist then.
Of course, it was before that time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it did. It before
it must have helped.
We did the opting out. We opting outside. I mean, really, I'd been on dialysis a fair while then. I can't remember how long, but a fair while. But it reaches a point that, and I sort of reached that point. Dialysis is fine, but you can sort of only be on it so long before you start going down a tipping point you'll never get back from. So even if they bung a kidney in, you're never going to be back to. You are going to give you damage. It's not a perfect solution.
And I know you said you were because you were doing it so often, you didn't have to spend too much time on it. But again, even an hour or two a day, I imagine, is super restrictive.
It is, yeah. I mean,
it means you have to plan everything.
That's the worst thing. What I did, what I was allowed to do, which was good for me, is I did a couple of hours every day, so that meant that I could virtually eat and drink quite normally. But what I couldn't do is anything impulsive. Mm-hmm. You know, I couldn't. If I surfed, I would have to do 2 hours, so I'd have to fit everything around it. Like if you said come down the pub, I couldn't miss a session. Mm-hmm. Or if I missed a session, I'd have to double up the next day, and then sometimes I'd think it's not worth the double up, so I'm not going to bother doing it. So it was just hard work, really. I even look at it now and think it was hard work, but that made it bearable.
That prompted the Philippines.
I still kept working. That prompted going away and seeing if I could. Buy a kidney, basically.
I mean, in the end, it wasn't a successful trip in terms that you didn't get a kidney from that trip.
No.
But it was almost, I think, pretty much a year to the day afterwards. The phone rang.
It was
on West Park Drive, and
the phone. I literally, because I'm a relatively rare blood group, not super rare, but relatively rare, like 10%, B rhesus negative, like 10% of the population. Yeah. Nowadays they can do a lot more though with different blood groups and stuff, so it's not quite as hard. And I reached the point that I thought this was it, and I was I started to try and get my mind around the fact this is it, this is where you're at, like, so just make the most of it. And then the phone rang. Now, funny enough, I've had it done. I had the phone ring twice. Now, by what I say, the phone rings and they tell you they've got a kidney. You got to pack your bags,
which means that
and
somebody young and in good health.
Well, it doesn't even matter if they're young. It means someone poor person or some nice person has lived their life, as much as they can, and they've had an accident, and obviously they've been good enough to donate their kidneys or their organs or whatever they do. So someone is being sad. But I think George answered the phone on both of those occasions, as I remember. And the first one I went in, all excited, ready to go. And basically it was a false start. They did my blood test and they said, there's a few antigens they're not happy with. So I get sent home without anything, and then another guy gets brought in and he has a go. So I was just sent, oh God, I'm off home again. Yeah. But on the second ring, it was okay, as it happened, and it was okay.
That was around 2008, I think. I remember coming to visit.
It was about 2008,
and
I was slower that time. The first time I had my kidney, I got up really quickly.
It was a big wait as well for the drugs to, because
kick in
to start working, because your body fights an alien organ, doesn't it?
Now the crazy thing about that was the first one worked straight away. My mum's did, so they put it in and it worked straight away. The second one is they put it in and it was fine, but it didn't work. It just didn't work. So I'm sitting there, I've come up from having the kidney thinking, great, but it wasn't working. So they leave you sort of fill up with fluid, and I mean fill up with fluid. And it went 7 days, and I'd have a tube you know, catheter in me, and a little bit would come out, like a little diddy bit would come out, and nothing, you know, nothing good. And then for some reason the catheter went a bit dodgy, so they had to take the catheter out. And the day after they did that, it was like on the 7th day, I couldn't stop pissing.
Which is
I couldn't
good
stop
news.
pissing, so the kidney had booted into gear, and off it went. It just started going. And then it was just like, they call it sleep-in. They did a biopsy of it, you know, they stab it and take a little, and they said, no, everything's fine with it, there's nothing wrong. But apparently it was just sleep-in, they call it.
Back in
And
the
then
water.
it woke up, and then, yeah, I was back. I didn't sort of, I came back okay, but each time the mountain's a little harder to climb, you know. So, but yeah, I was okay. I could surf, and I could play golf, and I could do those things. Yeah, it was good. It was really good. Yeah.
And we'll nowadays you still have to take drugs to deal with the immune system.
You take it. Oh, I take it all the time. I mean, those drugs have really they've affected me all the way through. Well, they've affected me really badly now, as it turned out, because from there, what was I, 5 or 6 years after that, I had tonsil cancer. So that was pretty bad. I didn't feel bad or anything, you know. I didn't feel very bad. I felt okay, as it turned out, but I wasn't. I think you were in Australia then, weren't you, George? Mm-hmm. George is in Australia, and
And he had to come back, did he?
yeah,
I remember telling you.
We were at Manly, weren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. After we'd been in the pub.
yeah.
Very
I know,
emotional.
I think we found out in
Oh, it was the night before you were going back, wasn't it?
West.
Yeah.
Or I think we found out when we
I
were
remember.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was gutting really, because I'd sort of,
That's one way.
I go every month. I go every month to get my bloods tested, and I was just hoping I could get through that month, and then go on to the next month, and then go on to the next month.
Yeah.
And I remember I was touching under my jaw, and I could feel just a little lump. I said, "Joe, what do you reckon that is there?" She goes, "Oh, nothing is. So it's just a gland." And when you go into these clinics, any lumps and bumps, they go mad, and it was like as if bloody, from feeling okay, you know, my kidney was okay, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm getting another month, just the shit at the fan. It was done really quickly though, but the shit at the fan, you know, and then you're away.
So I've said to you a few times that you should get a job. Well, get a job is not the right word for it. You could be a motivational speaker. I mean, I remember you coming in and talking to my students that time.
No, I'm.
But you've got something. You've learned something from that.
You made a really interesting point a moment ago, Scof, and you said that each time that there's a kind of a hill to climb, getting back up after it becomes
Harder.
that much more difficult. Yeah. And I mean, you do it time and time again, and as Tom's kind of alluding to here, there must be kind of a method to that. Perhaps you find a positive, a glimmer of.
Yeah,
hope.
well, that's what I do. That is. I mean, in all of them I do. I mean, I've had. I mean, I don't know how far forward you want to go, but I've always tried to, or I always try, even in most stuff I do, I'll try and find the one good thing, just the one good thing. It may be over in the corner, but it's a good thing. You know, I use it with Jane when, if you're tidying a really dirty room, some people don't know where to start. It's chaotic. But if you can find one thing, it's sort of like, right, I'll put all the greens over there. And as you put the greens there, you make space for the blues. Do you see what I mean? So suddenly you've got a pattern going here. So from my point of view, it would be, you know, I'm okay. I can actually, let's say, it's hard for me now, but I can walk around the golf. That's good. I can do that. I'll go and do that. I'll play golf. And then I may play a bit better golf. And I think, great, that's really good. I tell you what, I don't feel so bad now. I think I'll do, you know, and I try and build on that one positive rather than focus too much on the negative. It's very difficult to do sometimes, though. It's not like
but you are a very positive person, because people always want to hear your wisdoms, hear your motivation. You know, you've had a big impact on a lot of people's
I lecture
lives.
people. That's what I do. I
Yeah,
lecture.
good way. That we enjoy it. We come round
Oh,
and get
I
a
get,
talk.
I mean, the thing about that golf analogy about the everyone can hit
everybody
a
can
perfect
hit a
couple of
perfect
shots in a
shot.
row.
They can.
I can see where I'm standing, and you're telling it to me and George is like his head's swaying and he's yawning and he's like almost mouthing the words behind you.
I
But
see
like
them all the time.
That sits behind my own biggest success as a surfer. So it's huge, the impact you've had on other people's lives.
But everybody takes stuff you say in different ways. Some people have said stuff to me in passing that I've taken on, and I've taken it on really seriously. Like I tell a story your dad told me about him being a bricklayer. Now I don't know how true it was when he told me, but he'd go to the first place and he'd learn that he couldn't lay bricks at all. Couldn't lay bricks at all.
Just having come back from Morocco, and he was trying to earn some money to go back.
And he goes to the first.
Yeah.
He goes to the first. May have been easier in those days, but he goes to the first job. And he's like looking, and he watches a couple of bodies, lays a few bricks. A guy says, "What the fuck are you doing?" And then he has to go back. Then the next time he goes to the next one, he can do a bit more. And the next one, by the time he's done 3, he's saying he can lay bloody bricks, and he's a brickie now. Off he goes. And I'm just saying, it's a certain thing that you learn just bit by bit. You just.
Now
so,
then.
yeah.
You're starting to sound like the Scof we know and love there, because I know it's hard talking about some of the stuff we've just been talking about. So now that we've got you there, we've got you as that version of Scof. Let's move on to some of the areas in which you are very opinionated. Let's yak a bit about.
God.
Let's get you up on a few of your
I
high
was
horses
just starting to
now.
think
All
this is the
of
most
them.
I've ever been able to say in the presence of Papa Scof.
What?
Well, because
We're
normally
allowed
he'd
to
be
talk,
lecturing. Yeah, normally it'd be right. You
I
listen
lecture.
to me now.
Only
guys,
I
you listen.
talk. Just
Come on,
sit
right.
and listen.
Lecture us then, right? Let's start with this one, right? In the next episode after this, we're having a debate about jocks and purists, right? Let's get your thoughts on this, right? Joel Tudor apparently is the sort of the person who gave the quotes. Apparently it was to Surf Europe about how surfers are not athletes. Surfing isn't a jock sport. We'll leave that for football, and he means American football. Surfing has got some kind of like countercultural origin that we should. Rob and I have sort of almost set ourselves up as kind of opposites on it, although we probably find. Well, let's not admit that we find common ground
we'll leave
until we finished our debate. Where do you stand on this then? The state of modern surfing. Is it now a jock sport? Has it lost its roots, or was it always that?
You're implying that is it a sport it's a full-on sport which is competition and you go for it, or is it more of a lifestyle?
Well, I think we got a bit lost in your description there, because I think the debate centres
People
around
always do.
more about whether we should be kind of promoting that jockification of surfing, and I define the jockification of surfing as being changing surfing into something else, another sport, and kind of neglecting to acknowledge the kind of the culture and the history of it. So I think you kind of termed it quite well there when you said, is surfing all about competition? Is it super serious all the time? Or should we also acknowledge the reason we all started, certainly here, to have fun?
I mean, funny enough, this sort of thing was a discussion that we used to have in work as well, really, is that has the sort of everybody that does stuff in there, or the brands do stuff, they focus on the surfers that do well in competitions, and yet those very surfers that do well in competitions rely on, we rely on Rest Bay car park being full of people buying Quicksilver, Billabong and all of that, they probably wouldn't even know who's world champion. They wouldn't even know who's... The name they'd come up with, the Kelly Slater's going to be world champion for the year, as far as they're concerned. The same way as, a little bit like golf, Tiger Woods is still the main man. But Kelly Slater's... Most people who buy surfboards, who buy wetsuits, are doing it because the lifestyle is banging. And it is, isn't it? Let's face it, boys. The smell of that salt in the morning when you go down the beach, that fresh salt from the mist and everything in it, and the sun is shining. You know when you've had your surf, you're going to take your wetsuit down, the sun's going to wrap itself around you. Christ, who wants to play golf, isn't it? I mean that's just you couldn't get better. That's just, and everybody wants that, even the guys that compete. Now, from my point of view, that to me is, those are the times I remember probably more than I remember competing, you know. I remember competing, and it is nice to be good, and it is nice for people to sort of say some of the nice things you said about me, but you know, all of those, I just think it's if you can enjoy it, and those things as I just described, both of you smiled, because both of you
I was
done
kind
it.
of there. I was on the beach.
And both of you have gone down. Well, everybody that's ever surfed has looked for that day.
I don't know why this is though, right? But in terms of like being there, I was thinking, okay, you know, I know what happened. I was thinking, you were talking about it being sunny, and I was thinking, gosh, it's not sunny that often here in Wales. And some of us, you know, we've got to, if you want to be a Welsh surfer, you've got to live for like those big winter days. And I was thinking, you were talking about that, and you were romanticising, right? But I can see vividly the sight of you calling other people off because you're deepest. It's a big winter day in the point.
On the point.
You're deepest. There's Brad. There's Simon. There's like Gary Lewis is in there. It's like that tough crowd that it's impossible to get a good wave from. And then it's like, got it. And then there's you deepest taking off, and that is that's a jock moment, isn't it? Surely, you know, you've defeated the other guys in the lineup to that.
Not now, because Reiner would be deeper. He'd be another 50 yards further over.
He'd straighten it out and go up the rocks.
he'd be still free. He'd be at the bloody lighthouse.
But I was seeing that, and you know, and that's another moment. You know, that kind of feeling. You know, the
I think though that sometimes I don't know this.
You've got off on that.
I don't know this, and it would be really. We'll never find it out. But I don't know whether if I hadn't competed and done well, would I have still been that wave? No, would I have still been surfing?
Right.
Would I have still enjoyed it as much?
Or would you?
I know Brad still enjoys it as much as he probably did before, you know. And there are people, but I'm saying me, how I went around my business.
I reckon I can ask you a few sort of psychometric type questions then to try and help diagnose that. Is diagnose the right word?
Yeah.
How many times in your surfing life have you gone cruising on a single fin and say, you know, like, I'm going the 2-3 foot point today, and I'm going to take a single fin in, and I'm just going to style, and I'm not going to worry about my performance level?
No,
yeah, I don't really know if that's got anything to do with the jockification.
I would say that.
Well, no, but coming on from jockification, if he's asking me, you're saying, I don't know if I wasn't someone who'd won contests, would I have carried on into that sport? And I'm saying, okay, well, there's a test, right? Can you enjoy cruising on a single fin? Because that's got like zero to do with.
I might have been able to.
Zero
if
adrenaline either.
I might have
Zero
been.
adrenaline either, shouts George.
I might have been able to if I didn't, you know, I don't know whether Simon and Brad did the same thing. I'm sure they did. I went in the sea to get better.
Yeah.
So if I rode a single fin,
So it's about performance.
it turned into that. It definitely didn't start that way. I didn't start surfing because I wanted to be a good surfer. I definitely didn't do that.
But it became that.
I didn't know that. I didn't know because I don't think I was particularly good at you know, in school I was okay at the rugby and the stuff, but I wasn't like the best guy. I wasn't like Mr. Excel, you know.
I've got one for you then, Scove. So I think you're one of the perfect people to ask, because you've had those great competitive successes, but you were also kind of in your heyday was kind of just around the time that surfing was kind of starting to lose that I really reluctantly say the word kind of hippie. Well, that's certainly how it was viewed from the outside, maybe not from the inside, but that and kind of that travelling and exploring kind of phase. And you actually had a taste of that, didn't you, in the Canary Islands? You spent a lot of time over there.
Canary Islands was really good, yeah. And that point that you're changing, where it changed from hippie, was Thanks to bloody
I
Sean.
wish I hadn't used that word, but that's how it was perceived from the outside,
Thanks to
wasn't it?
Sean Thompson,
Mr.
because he
Slick.
turned up, had his hair cut and everything.
Because Andy Martin
And we all
in
wandered
episode
down.
2 talked about him, didn't he? With said the same things. Go on.
We all cruised down to wherever I can remember him being in. There's still photos of him around. The other day I saw some up, and he was down there and he was slick and his hair was cool and he just looked so like, look at this guy. And we're there with hair like you saw in a photograph all over the place, but great when it was wet. And we all came back and kept it nice and neat and tidy and sort of we're Mr. Slick, and we then, rather than not the sweatshirts inside out, they all became the right way. And some people may have loved it going that way. I went that way. I can't say that I didn't. I was part of those people that drove it towards being competitive, and here's me sitting back going, oh, I don't particularly like it. But at that time, that's what happened to it. And it definitely, there was a clunk over it. But I tell you what, mind, at that moment in time, I think some of us, in a little part of us, thought we could be professional people.
Yeah.
We thought, because remember, professional surfing at that time was Sean Thompson and Rab Bartholomew. They'd not long gone pro. Mm-hmm. They were like the first pros. So we thought we could be sort of pro-like, and Nigel Simmons was going pro. We thought we could, well, we could make, and there were teams.
Well, Carwin did, didn't he?
But there were teams everywhere. We were paid money to go away through the winter by people. Like Girl Wetsuits would give you 500 quid expenses to go and fly,
which then would get you a good trip
to get you to Tenerife for the winter to sort of. So you're thinking, right? I'm getting it now. I'm actually training in Tenerife.
Okay.
So
you kind of bridged that gap then.
Yes. So those things, we a lot of people were getting allowances to go away, as far as I was concerned, and we'd spend like 2 months in Tenerife, which was brilliant. Tenerife was when it was first. Before, I mean, if you don't go to Tenerife, hardly any of the hotels were there and stuff, and you camp in what we called the desert, and there's like 5-star hotels there now. You'd be plonked right in the middle of it. And I went there with Arwin Davis, yeah, and he was a great guy to go with. He's a little older than us, and he did sort of know the ropes, so he was really good. It was Arwin, and we had this flat in, it's still there, I think it's the Sol, it's 2 massive towers in Las Cristianos, and we had this flat, and to this very day, I get photos now sent back and forward. Ian Bowen was there as well. Ian Bowen came with us, and to this very day, I don't know who rented the flat. I have no idea. I just know people came in and out of it. There was 4 or 5 people all of the time. Yeah. One would go, someone would turn up. I don't know who rented it. I don't know whose it was. I couldn't tell you. It was just there were guys going in and out of it all the time. Ian Bowen used to be funny over there.
Ian Bowen, also known as Yanto, for listeners who've had to cede position to him in the point on a big day.
He again was a nice guy to go with. All the guys were nice, I'm not saying you wouldn't. If you weren't nice, you wouldn't go away with them, would you? So he was really good. We had a good time over there. And we were sort of semi-pioneers. We weren't the first by a long way to go over there, but we were. The Spanish were a bit hassly, but we were, we stayed there for ages.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just Tenerife, it was that northern track in Fuerteventura.
Yeah, I was later to that, though. The guy who discovered that is Giles Davis. Forterman, isn't he?
That's what he was called.
Yeah, Forterman. Yeah. And quite rightly, too, because he doesn't get the credit that he got for actually the northern track, because he lived there. He's one of those guys, I think, that if you went there, Giles would pop up and you'd think, wait, where did you come from, Giles? He lived there. He surfed that well. He surfed it a lot and he surfed it well.
How much of modern surfing do you watch? You've seen the stuff that
I watch.
Italo Ferrer.
Yeah, I watch. I got to admit, I'm a Facebook watcher.
Yeah.
And it's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's beyond. It's beyond thinking that I could do it. Really, it's sort of.
Do you actually think that then? So you think
they
that
do stuff that.
If you had your time, if your time had been now, you don't think
I would
you'd
love
be
to
flying
think,
through the air?
I would love to think I could. I'd love to think I could do. I'd love to fly through the air. I mean, I don't think I'd like to live in this era, but I would like to. I'd like to surf in this era. I think.
Take the knowledge and equipment back.
I think doing. We spoke about this when we were surfing. There was actually people, me included, would tell you cannot do an air because you go backwards and the wave goes forwards. So how can you land an air? You can't.
Right.
It cannot be done. So the line is drawn, it's like it cannot be done. And now, literally, a surfboard is a skateboard, isn't it? It is literally a skateboard now. And they're doing stuff which is insane. And I watch it and I think it is. And also the re-entries they do. I mean, even when I was back surfing, when they were doing like re-entries, I was always a re-entry man. The board goes up in the air and the board comes down. Where they were doing it from, like, the tail goes up in the air, didn't it? The tail goes up in the air and the board comes down. They didn't even get the nose over the top of the wave. They got the tail over the top of the wave. And all of those things are just insanely good. I mean, each one runs on, though. I will say that. You learn to do, and this is the big one, there's a starting point of anything. Like, there's always a starting point if you can do, for instance, if you can do a backhand bottom turn, you can do a forehand cutback. And so, if you can take off and turn like that, you should be able to take off and turn like that. So, every manoeuvre will build your repertoire up. So, I'm assuming that if you take that as a logic, that once you can do so much of an air or so much of that, then everything locks into place that, I can do that, so I can do this. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything is built on it. It looks very complicated when you look at it as a whole, but if you break it down, there'll be lots of bits that are the same bits. Like everything.
Absolutely. Talking of high performance in professional surfing, you travel pretty widely as part of the British team. So
Yeah.
Australia, South Africa, USA, and there's a great story that you told me before. I think it was in Australia, and you saw someone do a proper backhand snap
Yes.
for the first time. And was it the same event that you were
We
kind of intimidated? You didn't want to go in the water because you didn't think you were
as
good as these guys.
I can remember that really vividly. Again, I can't speak for because Bad was there and Simon was there and Karen was there.
Full Welsh team, but
Yeah.
part of Team Britain.
Yeah.
GB.
I can remember going down to Duranbar, and Duranbar's got two. It's got an outside reef and it's got an inside. And I think it was the outside reef we watched him. And I believe it was a guy in a yellow wetsuit. And he was doing these backhand snaps. And I had never seen anything like it. He was coming. I don't know what we were doing before. I think we were just going up to the top and coming down.
Yeah.
Literally just. This guy was coming off the bottom and whacking the top of the wave. And they were surfing so well. And again, this is back to probably me feeling that I wasn't good enough to be in the British team. I was looking at them thinking, I'm not good enough to be here. These guys are the guy that is surfing out there that isn't even in the Australian team.
Yeah.
And I'm surfing by him looking like a gook in my lovely kit, and thinking, who are you? I'm in the British team. Are you?
Again,
Oh.
that kind of that mentality.
Yeah,
competitiveness comes back though, and you were, as we've heard time and time again throughout this interview, you were so dedicated to improving to the point where you felt you were perhaps intimidated to go in.
I was
appear that way,
100%.
but with all that dedication and that time spent trying to better yourself or better your surfing and become the best, do you feel that perhaps sometimes you missed out on the kind of the peripheral fun?
Yeah, I think I did, yeah.
Because you're so focused on that goal.
I think I did. I've said this a few times to probably George really. I look and I think sometimes the guys who are, I'm not saying they're not good surfers, but semi-finalists and stuff like that, they enjoy the whole of the competition.
Perhaps less focused on the end goal.
Whereas, I know now, funny enough, because I've read about it, if you go now to and you stay in a hotel where the pro golf tours are, every one of those is in bed by 9 and they eat their meal in their room and they have the breakfast in the room. There's just rows of trays, and apparently it's the European guys that'll go, "Oh, are you off out for a meal?" And they all go out for a meal and they have a meal, which you would think you'd want to do.
The Americans
but
could be
Americans
anywhere, really.
are like, "I'm stuck. This is my job. I'm in here. I'm out to win."
It wouldn't matter if they were playing in Dubai or
Correct.
in
Correct.
Ohio. as they
They're
are
just in
now.
a hotel. They're going to a golf course. They don't go out. And I'm not saying that I would have, and I'm not saying I did, but I'm just making a point that sometimes when you try your best to win, you can miss out on a lot of other things that when you look back in later life, you think, "Oh, I would have preferred to have a great time doing that than actually."
I'm sure there's
than
plenty of
actually
people
winning.
that didn't focus.
Yeah.
That would have perhaps
Maybe.
preferred to have done that and achieved
Maybe,
some
yeah.
of the things
I
we
can
did.
honestly say every time I went in the sea, I did my best. Like I wasn't drunk the night before,
Yeah.
or I wasn't bad. Like, you know, there are people that'll get so hammered they get up and they can hardly surf in the heat. Now, I can honestly say I never did that. If anybody, when people beat me, and a lot of people did, they would beat me fairly. Like I was on top song, you know. It wasn't because I was drunk.
When and how are we getting you back in the sea again then?
Christ, this body got lucky to get up the stairs, let alone get out the back.
Doesn't look that way to me.
No,
and I've
it's
seen
not.
George's Instagram. You're out there on the golf course now, travelling very
I'm trying.
fast actually.
I got a have you seen that?
Thanks to a Segway. Yeah.
I got a Segway that takes me around the golf course. Yeah, I struggle a
you,
little.
you
It might
did
be an
say to me
ocean
before, though.
equivalent.
Yeah, you did say to me before that you thought that getting in the water and cruising would,
I
be
would.
as accessible.
Do you know?
as-
I think I'm think deep down. I'd be really nervous about it.
Yeah.
What I did was when they did this, one of my, it was for the tonsil cancer, they mess about with your arm and your muscles in the arm. When I couldn't paddle properly, so this arm would push
Right.
the water. Literally, they wouldn't come up enough, and
Yeah.
I'd push the water. And I went in the water in Tenerife, and it was just like, nah, this is just sort of like,
What about an SUP? I got one in my house. I can inflate it and bring it round tomorrow.
Christ, what? Go in the water? No. No, it's, I would like to. I dream I'd like to.
All right.
But on the same thing, I don't know.
Are we going to make this happen, George? We're going to get him in the water.
I think
aren't
it's
we,
a
at some
full
point?
like blocking manoeuvre. We just
Absolutely, it's easy.
everybody in.
When, like you said, when the sun's out, it's,
I'd probably alright if it was small and I'd be on a I believe, what are they called, softboard.
Yeah.
I may be alright on one of them, but no. But then if I went on a softboard, no, you know, I might grind, and I don't want to do that. Really, oh God, it's just, everything is hard work. Like I say, I live in pain, man.
Apart from
Pain's my
telling-
friend. I'm learning pain to be my friend.
Right, but
That's what I say.
you're just as chirpy and as full of beans, and you know the way
I try to be. I'm not always mine.
Stories.
When they found cancer in my lip and they cut my lip off, that was a massive issue.
Yeah.
That was a huge issue. That was the biggest one of them all to get over.
Right.
Because I felt that it's deformed you, and I think some of the issue with that was when I've had other operations, there's been a sort of build up to it. There's been a build up to it, where this one was literally, I went in the morning, and I came out looking, well, not like this because it's stretched, like, Jesus, sucking through a straw in the afternoon. So there was no sort of, it was like, Jesus, and I didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was. So when I woke up from that, it was
Again, another
a pretty
big hurdle, substantial.
Yeah,
hurdle for you to-
I mean, a lot of these hurdles come though, and because I'm on drugs for my kidney, and I remember back in the 80s we didn't have sun cream, or we had it, but we didn't use it very good. The idea of going brown was you go red and then you go brown. There's no like shading of brown. It's either red and then you go brown and you peel a bit, which is good because that skin underneath doesn't. So you know, all of us, and all of that sun that I had, and all of the sun on my on my face and everywhere has come home. This may have happened to me when if I lived to 90, it may be the same thing. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But at 90, they probably wouldn't do anything about it.
Right.
It's just because I take the drugs, it's just quicker with me. But yeah, this was the hardest one. This was a dark place.
Yeah, well, you know.
And again, you found the positive, though, as you mentioned earlier. You find the little positives and
There was one that, when I say I had to dig in, this one was one that I had to dig in.
Well, let's look at one of the biggest positives in your life right now by turning our necks towards the hot tub over there in the corner of the garden, and George.
Lucy's nothing to do with me.
And George, you know, the way George speaks about you, you're his hero. You're our hero. And now, partly because it's actually quite a cold evening now, the birds have stopped chirping, and I want to see George shiver a bit, and I'm also looking forward to jumping in that hot tub myself shortly. I reckon we're going to try and see if we can get George out now. Are we going to get the floor all wet? Is producer Dodd going to get freaked out about the mics? About the water in the wires. Let's get George in front of the mic now. Come and tell your dad how much of a legend he is.
Yeah.
Are we going to confirm that Mark Schofield...
He knows what
Oh, look, producer Dodd has moved the chair out the way now. Look, he's scared, isn't he, Scof? He's scared of getting cold, don't you think?
He's never sat there and done it to me on everyone. We don't do it, Tom.
Don't, he'd be alright. I know what he thinks.
Yeah. Well, you heard it there from your son George.
Yeah.
And from Rob and I. You know, you're a lot of people that you respect and admire, they have you as their hero, and that's not been earned lightly. You know, it's not.
Well,
you're not just the people's hero because you're a bit cool and you served good. It's the whole package of who and what you are.
I don't think I deserve that hero bit, but it's very nice of you. Thank you. It really is, but I don't think I deserve it. I just do.
Those lectures we've received.
We do.
I wonder how many hours between us we've sat.
No,
and
I do
talked
lecture.
Not enough.
Not enough.
I can see movement in the hot tub.
I said trying to not pee myself.
No, I do. I am a bit of a lecturer.
Right.
In the best way, and we love it. And yeah,
it's funny, really. I actually like people's points of view. That's what I say. And unfortunately,
you always play a bit of devil's advocate. You broach a topic, and then
we spoke about this. They've changed the zodiac signs, haven't they? Because I am a Libran, so that means I am sort of meant to be the scales.
Yeah.
And I do, and I know it upsets George terribly. I will always fall on, or most of the time, although I know this is the right side, I'll always argue for the
well,
like I will always say
you
that
just
you
tucked
should.
yourself up completely then, because I put forward the argument that you're a legend, and you just said that you knowingly have taken the side that you that is not right. So,
Yeah,
so there it is.
right.
There you go.
That's it. You're done. You're a legend, and you failed to dispute it.
There you are. So
Yeah, but that's why the star signs have changed.
To say I'm not a legend.
It's as always. We've had an absolute ball talking to you. And how have you enjoyed your first visit to the garden studio? It's funny, isn't it?
In your own house.
In your own house. But isn't it? It's funny when you start talking about certain stories. It drags memories that you haven't ever thought about since the day they happened.
It really has, and I want to thank you two guys, because if anything, that's one thing it's done, and it's been really nice. You've made me think about stuff that I haven't thought about for a long time. Things that I did when I was with Brad, like with Andrew, the first time with Andrew and stuff. Just things, and then going even further back and remembering the trips in there. And those things have been really nice for me to sort of bring forward, because I have a tendency, I've got to stay in this moment, because I know it sounds really bad, and it sounds I don't moan all the time, but it's a struggle, and I do get upset a little bit that I can't do stuff. I get frustrated. Like, I would love to be able to go in the sea. I'd love to be a fit and healthy 56-year-old, and I'm not saying why me, but I do think as well that some of the issues that I do get have, I'm going to say, made me a better person than I probably would have been. We'll never know that. Yeah. But I look at it again. I'm taking a positive. I hope that it sort of made me more, just a nicer person, because I may have been like, yeah, I won the Welsh, I did this, I'm this, I'm the greatest. Where now I don't look at him as being that. I look at him as I caught the right wave at the right time. I had the right board. I had the right board. I had the right judge. I had the guy liking me. I don't know. God, in those days, the judge may have marked you wrong. So I had all of those fell my way, which was nice, and it's been good. But I thank you guys for letting me chat about it.
It's been our absolute pleasure, and you, dear listeners, we hope you have enjoyed listening to this one as much as we've enjoyed recording it. Next week, at long last, it's time to pick a side as we try to put to bed once and for all the question of jockification. Is it good for our beloved surfing, or does it spell disaster for the sport?
Yes, Rob and I, along with a sympathetic recruit each, will go head to head in a moderated debate. Expect fireworks, or at least a few laughs, as we attempt to win the favour of our carefully selected adjudicator. Regardless of your allegiances or the eventual winner, you are sure to be entertained.
And remember that you can hear that episode and all previous ones by searching and subscribing to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you want to get in touch with a story, comment or critique, you can email us at castcrest@gmail.com. All that remains to say is a huge and heartfelt thank you to Mark and the family Schofield for your hospitality.
Hey George, you should have got out of that hot tub.
Yeah, and of course you, the listener. Until next time, stay safe, stay stoked, and we'll see you in the water. Goodbye.
Bye, Val.
Bye bye.